Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have just over 2 hours worth of horror stories as per usual. I hope you all enjoy it. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's aim for 1,250 likes. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this all the time. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. The world outside is gone, only the village lives on. For most of my childhood, this was my truth. Me and my mom lived in a tiny community comprised of a few dozen people. Our village laid in the middle of the desert, an agglomeration of flimsy houses, worn down by a lack of care and the frequent sandstorms. There were no roads here, nor technology that would have linked us to the remains of the dead world. Life was difficult, and it took a toll on all of us. I saw our fellow villagers daily, but can't recall what their smiles looked like. Still, at least they were alive. The last people alive on Earth, as our leader constantly reminded us. And we were lucky enough to have a working well in the center of the village, the water of which we used to grow the few crops we had to feed us. I spent most of my days reading. There was no electricity here, but my mother was an avid reader and had brought us a lot of books from the world before. I learned about how the old world worked, about self-moving machines made of metal called cars, about televisions and computers. I remember her also fervently insisting on us using them to teach me. She wanted me to know how to read, how to write, some history, some maths. She used to be passionate about me getting an education. She did not want me to turn feral, she said. But little by little, the passion within her died, and my lessons became ever rarer. I was 13 now, and the thought that I had still been too young to comprehend that world while I still lived in it saddened me. I had often harassed my mom with questions. Why can't we leave the village? When did we move here? What happened to the outside world? Every time, I could see how disturbed they made her. She only ever gave me very brief answers. The world outside was uninhabitable now. Everything that was good in it had died, and the only people left alive were bloodthirsty monsters. She had taken me here where it was safe when I was still young. My dad had died in the old world, and I must promise not to ever try to leave the village. This was the same story told by our leader, a grim-looking man with a black bushy beard. He had never been a brute to me, but part of me deeply feared him. He did not like me reading. Every time he saw me with a book, he would peer at me with those crazy, bulging eyes. He had told my mom to take those books away from me many times, that it would make me too curious. She had tried. She had hidden those books in every nook and cranny of the village, but I had always managed to find them. As such, our leader had suggested she just burn them. Thankfully, she never could bring herself to do it. I had always admired her for that because, generally, the role of our leader was law, and crossing him was not a common occurrence. One day, I heard roaring thunder on the horizon. A point in the distance grew bigger and bigger, the sound becoming ever louder as it did. I was terrified at first, but as it approached, I noticed it matched the description of what I had read in many of my books. It was a car. The villagers had come out of their houses looking at it in fear. Eventually it stopped and the doors opened. 2 people came out, a man and a woman. They did not look like monsters, and they did not look dangerous. They just seemed very puzzled. I had my fears, of course, but the desire to see a car and to talk to the only new, friendly faces that came from the outside world overtook me as I ran towards them. "Benjamin, stop!" My mom screamed, but it was too late. I was determined to learn more about these people. As I came in closer, I saw that they were just humans like us, but their clothes looked colorful and clean, nothing like the rags we all wore here. They were all groomed and had a pleasant smell. "What are you doing here, little guy?" the woman asked. "This is my village. I live here with my mom." The two briefly looked at each other before the man turned his attention back to me, a puzzled look on his face. "You live here? Why?" Their question confused me. "Well, because it's safe here, and the rest of the world is dead." "Dead?" "No, it's..." I heard a huge explosion and looked back to see our leader holding a small, metallic rod I would later recognize as a gun. I turned my attention back to the two strangers. One of them was screaming on the ground, bleeding profusely from his leg. The other one had put her hands up in fear. "Get them," the leader shouted. Most of the villagers were in too much of a shock to obey, but the four strongest of them ran towards us and took the couple away. My mom looked terrified, so much so that she seemed to have forgotten about me for a few minutes. Eventually, she grabbed me by the arm and dragged me back home. She did not sleep much that night. I don't think anyone could. Not with the screams that were frequently erupting from our leader's house. As the screams periodically quieted down, I could hear her pacing back and forth but couldn't tell what she was doing. Not until I saw a bright light out of my window and observed, powerless, as all of our books were consumed by the flames. Life had become even duller. I had no more books to read, and there were no kids around my age to play with. The only novelty was the presence of the two strangers that had come here in their car. They had disappeared for a while, locked in the basement of our leader's house, but had finally been allowed to join us. Unfortunately, they had become dull too. Every time I tried to ask them the many questions regarding the outside world I had, they would just parrot what I had already learned 1,000 times. The old world was dead. This village was the only place that remained. The two of them had lived alone in their car for years. They used to sell clothes for a living, so they had a reserve of clean ones to wear. They had traveled around the country, but every place they stopped by was full of monsters. They were only locked in our leader's basement because he wanted to make sure they weren't monsters too, and they did not know what I meant when I mentioned screaming that night. They hadn't heard anything. Their story seemed off to me, but I eventually ended up resigning myself to accepting it. My mom did not like me talking to our neighbors. She always looked at them with a mixture of fear and distrust. To me, they both seemed like decent people. In fact, I found them quite subservient, and that was despite the fact that our leader had ordered their car burned down. Even I was upset about that, as this would have been my only chance to see one of those cars in other form than simply in text. I imagine they must have been furious, but they seemed resigned. My theory was that they were just happy to have found a safe community like ours in such a hostile world. I would quickly realize how wrong I was. A few months had passed without anything out of the ordinary happening. I'd gotten used to our new neighbors, and a few people had started opening up to them. My mom was not one of those people. She still deeply distrusted them, as did our leader. One night, I was woken up by shouting. I couldn't make out what was happening, so I quickly got dressed and stormed outside. My mom had tried to stop me as I ran past her, but it was in vain. "I told you this would happen. We cannot trust anyone from outside the village." Our leader was walking back and forth between our two new neighbors that were kneeled down in front of him, periodically pointing his gun at them. "Please, we're sorry. We won't tell anyone," the man said. "Samuel, is this necessary?" Nervously asked one of the villagers. Our leader shot a furious gaze at him. You all told me I should give them a chance. Do you people not understand what is at stake here? Come on, let's just lock them back up and... And what? We just leave them there and patiently wait for them to attempt to escape again? While we have to feed them the little food we have? Food that they won't help produce? Maybe they'll come around. Even if they manage to escape, they would be stranded in the middle of the desert. Our leader shook his head. I won't take any chances. Do you realize what they would do if they found us? I made a promise I would keep you all safe, and I meant it, even if this is what it takes. What happened next is a blur. I remember a red mist of blood coming out of the man's mouth. The woman screamed, but soon, a second shot came out of the leader's gun, and she too hit the floor. My mom, who had spent all of this time half-heartedly attempting to pull me back, suddenly used all of her strength to drag me back home. I was in a state of shock. As I looked up to my mother for comfort, I saw something I would never forgive. She did not look angry. She did not look scared. She simply looked relieved. I wouldn't be able to say exactly when I knew I had to leave the village. Part of me had always wanted to explore the unknown, but it used to be more of a pipe dream than any sort of concrete plan. Ever since our leader had murdered the two strangers, though, I had gotten more and more convinced I needed to leave this place. Every night I would look out of my window and picture how I would escape, in which direction I would run, how much food and water I would take, if I would tell my mother anything. Until one night, leaving just felt right. I collected my blankets and snuck out of my room. After that, I got a hold of the bag my mom used when she helped collecting crops. I grabbed all of the food I could and then headed for the well. There, I filled our 2 jugs full of water and headed for the desert. The night was chilly, even with all of the blankets I had wrapped myself in. I felt guilty about leaving my mom before at least talking to her, but she would never have let me leave, and had I given her a warning? I told myself that one day I would find a good place with good people, and that I come back for her. I walked for days under a blazing sun and through freezing night, directing myself with the help of the distant mountains. At multiple points I felt like I would never make it. Part of me wanted to head back to the village, but every time the thought crossed my mind, I reminded myself of the demise of the 2 strangers that had attempted to escape. Would the leader kill me too? If I was to die, at least I wanted to see what was really out there before I did. Beyond exhausted, I finally reached a road. I'd read about how they were used in the old world and feared that following it may have led me to the monsters, but doing so was my only alternative to simply dying in the desert. Cars passed by. I tried to hide from them at first, fearful of who might be driving them, but hiding in such a flat terrain was next to impossible, and the ones that did see me did not seem to care. Eventually, I stopped minding them. 4 of 5 cars had passed me by before one of them stopped. An old man came out looking distraught. "Young man?" I froze. "Why are you alone? Where are your parents?" I did not know how to respond to that. The village had always sought to conceal its presence. Revealing its existence may put my mother in danger. Still unable to form any kind of sentence, I simply shrugged. "Honey?" An old woman had come out of the car and started talking to the old man. "Honey, he's clearly distressed. Let's bring him back to the city." The old man nodded. "Well, come on, young man. You can't stay alone in the middle of the desert." I hesitated. I remembered all of the horror stories regarding the outside world I was told back in the village, but those people did not seem like monsters, and the last strangers I had met had never attempted to harm me in any way. The old woman extended her hand, and I took it. Being inside of a car would have been an extremely exciting novelty for me. had I not been so nervous. The old couple kept asking me questions I did not know how to answer. Which city do you come from? Well, what music do you like? What's your favorite radio station? Or if you want, we can use the Spotify's. I could tell that my lack of answers deeply concerned them. Honey, we should really bring him to a hospital. After a while, we reached a huge city, or at least that's what it seemed like to me, whose only experience of community was a tiny village. At first, I curled up below the car window trying to hide from what might see me from the outside, but little by little, I rose up and dared to look at the streets. It was a marvelous sight. Plenty of people wearing clean clothes, holding bags full of food, huge buildings as far as the eye could see, and more cars in a few seconds than I had known people in my entire life. We reached the hospital. The old couple did not leave my side as the doctors inspected me. He's malnourished and dehydrated. Other than that, he seems to be in good health. But he won't tell us anything. We don't know where he comes from, nor where his parents are. Are you sure his head is all right? The old woman asked with a shaky voice. He does not seem to have suffered any trauma. Still, we need to establish the identity of his parents. I think the police would be best suited for that. The old couple gave their thanks, then brought me to a police station nearby. A couple of men in blue questioned the old couple, leaving me in the waiting room. A bunch of magazines were laid on the table, and I grabbed one as quickly as I could. This had been my first time reading after my mom had burned all of our books a couple of months ago. After a few dozen minutes, the old couple and the police officers came back out of the office. A slightly overweight mustached man, who seemed to be the leader of the group, reassured the both of them. You did the right thing bringing him to us. Don't worry. We will take care of him now. What will happen to him? The old man asked timidly. First, we'll try to locate his parents. If we do, we'll launch an investigation to check why he ran away from home. In the worst case, we may have to place him in a foster home or an orphanage. Please keep us updated. And if the little man needs a new home, I think our son won't mind us hosting him in his old room. He's grown now, you know. The old woman smiled, a twinkle in her eyes. The mustached officer nodded. After giving me a tap on the head and telling me that everything would be all right, the couple headed for the door. The mustached man brought me in his office, along with one of his red-haired colleagues. First, he asked me if I wanted anything to drink or to eat. I told him that the old couple had already given me a few snacks on the way here, but that I would gladly drink something. He obliged, and then the questions began. What's your name? Benjamin. Nice to meet you, Benjamin. I'm Paul. Could you tell me why you were on your own when that couple found you? I hesitated. My mother had always told me to fear the outside world, and not to trust anyone who wasn't from the village. But so far, everyone I had met outside of the village had just been good to me, or better than anyone I had known while living there. Maybe it was alright for me to open up a bit. I ran away from my village. Your village? What is it called? I shrugged. It doesn't really have a name. We simply referred to it as home. The two officers quickly glanced at each other. The red-haired man, who did not seem very interested by my case up to this point, started staring at me intensely from that point on. The mustached man cleared his throat and proceeded. And you live there with your parents? With my mom. My dad passed away when I was still very young. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It's all right. I never really knew him. Could you tell us more about your village? Where is it located, for instance? It's somewhere in the desert. I can't really say where. The couple that found you said you were walking alongside a road. Does that road pass through your village? There are no roads where I come from. The red-haired man seemed more and more puzzled by what I was saying. The mustached man turned towards him. He seemed to hesitate for a bit, then asked me to excuse them, as they had a word outside the room. Cautious, I put my ear against the door to hear what they were saying. Do you hear what I'm hearing, Joe? I do, but I'm not sure what to make of it. Can't say I'm an expert with interrogating children, but this sounds even more serious than I thought. Maybe we should call in a child psychologist before we proceed further. At this hour, I don't think we'll have much luck. Perhaps we should keep the kid here tonight and wait until next morning then. He doesn't have anywhere to go anyway. The discussion continued for a little while. There were terms thrown around which I did not fully understand. From what I could tell, the mustached man was wondering whether keeping a child in the police station for an entire night was all right, while the red-haired man reassured him that it was. Eventually, they both came back in the office and told me I would spend the night here, offering me books and blankets to make my stay more comfortable. I suppose most people would have called my sleeping quarters frugal, but to me, they were the cleanest sheets I could remember ever sleeping in. Wake up. I opened my eyes and saw the red-haired officer in front of me. What time is it? It's early, but this is important. We found someone that can help you. Come with me. I got up and quickly got dressed in the new clothes the mustached man had brought me before I had fallen asleep the night before. I then proceeded to follow the officer. Can I say goodbye to your friend before leaving? Paul? No, he isn't here right now. I'm sorry. That's a shame. He was nice. Yes, don't worry. He told me he would understand if you had no time to say your goodbyes. When we got out of the police station, I followed the officer for a few more minutes. Our path ended in front of a car where a dark-haired man who must have been in his 30s was waiting for me. Here, this is the kid I told you about. Do you think it could be him? The man looked at me. I could feel his eyes cutting right through me like razor blades. He stared at my face for some time, then took out a photograph. His gaze wandered back and forth between the photograph and my face for at least a full minute. Very well could be. Hard to say. Well, you gonna take him or not? We can't stay here too long. The black-haired man turned his attention back to me. Hi, Benjamin, right? I nodded. My name's Gio. I'll be taking care of you from now on if that's alright. I wondered how much of a choice I really had. Then again, everyone I had met so far had been nice to me, and this man did not seem much different from the rest. Yes, I think it should be fine. I answered, as he opened the door of his car and gave me a sign to climb in. After driving for a few hours, we arrived. Gio's house was even bigger and prettier than the rest of them. When I first arrived, he took a few pictures of me, asked me a few questions about my mom, and then disappeared for a few hours. When he came back, he told me I would live here from now on, a huge smile on his face. For the next few months, he did not ask much of me. Many people came in and out of the house to have long discussions with him. He told me that they came for advice, and that giving it was his job. He told me that maybe one day, he would tell me how to do it. Gio brought me to a hairdresser. He also brought me a pair of sunglasses, which he said I should wear often, as it would protect my eyes, which had been damaged by my time in the desert. He would often take me out to restaurants where I discovered flavors that were completely alien to me, showed me around the city, bought me ice cream, taught me how to use a computer, and gave me plenty of books, movies, and video games. I would say I was living the dream, but I deeply missed my mom and really wanted to see her again. Shortly after my 14th birthday, Gio started asking me questions in a very relaxed, nonchalant way. Could you tell me more about the village you come from? Who lived there besides you and your mom? I told him about the rest of them. The woman with the crooked nose, the man with no hair, the couple that would never leave each other's side, and of course, our leader. That one in particular really caught his attention, as he kept asking questions about him. Finally, he let out a laugh. Fucking Samuel. You know him? I asked, surprised he knew his name. I know all of them, and especially him. But how? Let me ask you this instead. What did they tell you about your father? My dad? Well, he passed away when I was young. Gio grinned. No, Ben. Your dad is very much alive. I stayed silent for a little while, trying to take all of this in. Gio was patiently sitting in the chair across my own, waiting for me to say something. But my mother has always said. She lied, Ben. She did not want you to know about him. Why? Where is he? He's in prison. Prison? Isn't that where they lock up criminals? Yes, but don't worry, Ben. Your dad is not a criminal. They simply lied about him. Can I go visit him? No, I'm afraid the lies they told about him were so severe that they won't allow anyone to visit him for now. My heart was racing. I then proceeded to ask a question I did not want to hear the answer to. Who is they? Who betrayed him? The people in your village. All of them. Except for you, of course. You were too young. Images of the village were racing through my mind. Life had been hard there, sure. The people seemed miserable, but none of them were evil. That being said, our leader did kill that innocent couple. If he was capable of doing that, there was no telling what else he might have done before settling in the village. Why? Your father was a very beloved man. He had many friends in many places, even some of the most important ones. Samuel, too. Your leader, as you called him, was once a friend of your dad's. In fact, he was one of his best ones. They used to work together quite a bit. What was their job? Gio seemed to hesitate for a bit, then answered. Protection. Your dad made sure the shop owners all across the country were all protected from thieves and hooligans. A sense of pride rushed through my head. Not only was I the child of someone important, I was also the child of a good person who cared for the security of others. But then, why did they betray him? That, Ben, I do not know. Samuel was the brains behind it all. We think that maybe he got caught doing something bad and was offered freedom in exchange for betraying your dad. I could feel a hint of anger in Gio's voice, which had remained unwaveringly calm up to this point. Or maybe he just decided he no longer wanted to work with him. Who knows? He found other people that were just as jealous as your dad as he was. Some of his clients, mostly. In exchange, he promised that he would keep them safe, no matter the personal cost. They all told horrible lies about your father, about how he did not really protect people, about how he bullied them into paying for his protection. It was all nonsense, of course. My mom wouldn't do that. I almost wanted to apologize for raising my voice like that to someone who had been so kind to me, but Gio did not seem bothered by it. As I said, I do not know why each individual person in your village personally decided to betray your father. There were parts of your father's work your mother knew little about. Nothing bad, of course, but maybe she was lied to or tricked into believing that it was. Gio picked up his glass and drank some water from it, then continued. They did not go to the village straight away, you know. Samuel promised them that he would find a safe place for them to live after the fact. They tried to start new lives all over the country. They even thought about settling outside of it. But like I told you, your father had many friends. Not just in this country, but in the entire world. We would always close in on them. Samuel knew it. Eventually, though, all of them disappeared. Nobody knew where they had gone. That is, until we met you, Ben. We're going to need your help. To know where the village is? Exactly. We want to bring justice to the people who wronged your father. Justice? What will you do to them? Geo laughed. Oh, nothing too bad, don't worry. We just want to find out why they lied about your father like so. Maybe even convince them to help us get him out of prison. Who knows? Then you could finally meet him. I don't know. I understand, Ben. Please, take all the time you need. After the initial shock of all those revelations had passed, I quickly made up my mind. I wanted to see my mom again, to be reunited with her in this world of light and abundance. Geo was a good man. He would see that my mother was no traitor. Maybe my father would even be released once all the horrible lies about the villagers had told about him were proven false. Maybe we could all be reunited. I did not precisely know where my village was, of course, but Geo showed me where the old couple had reported picking me up, and the pieces of the puzzle started to fit. I remembered the mountains in the distance, the defunct buildings I had occasionally come across. After a few days, I finally managed to locate my village precisely. It was hard to tell from the satellite imagery that a village was there, as the frequent sandstorms had covered the roofs and walls in grainy dust. But it definitely was. I was sure of it. Great job, Ben. You did us a great favor today, Geo said before making multiple calls. That night, after coming back home from ice cream, many people were waiting in Geo's parking lot. Geo approached and greeted them, tapping some of them on the back. He then told me to go upstairs. Are you going to find my mom? I asked. Yes, Ben. The day has finally come. Before I turned heel to enter the house, I saw a man carrying multiple metallic objects and putting them in the trunk of Geo's car. I thought I had recognized their shape, but refused to believe it. I ran towards the trunk. My heart dropped as I realized that those were indeed guns, but that the trunk was also filled with so much more. Ropes, chains, gasoline, jugs covered in stickers warning of the hazardousness of their content. Geo, who made little effort to stop me from running off, casually approached and slammed the trunk shut. I thought you were going to talk. What the hell do you need all of this for? I told you, the village is unarmed, save for the one small gun Samuel wields. Geo smiled. Don't worry, Ben. It's just like your father's job. Unfazed, he finished. For protection. Now, I am not sure about you, but I am someone who needs to do stuff in the middle of the night. When I was younger, I was knitting or doing the dishes, and when I was even younger, it was reading or drawing. When I got my first car, it became driving. It was not a continuous thing. I didn't drive every night. I would do it for a number of weeks, stop for a little bit to do something else, and then pick it up again. I'm not sure why I did this. Just happened for some reason. It was around the month of March when it did. I had just lost my father and was depressed and bored out of my mind due to the fact that I had not seen a lot of my friends in a while. My wife was out of town for business and I was home all alone. I didn't have work in the morning, but I had gone to sleep very early. So when I was awakened from the empty void of sleep, I wasn't entirely displeased. I turned the light on. The house was quiet. the only sound being the ticking of the clock in the other room and my now awakened cat purring. The TV was on, the volume very low but showing an episode of Gilmore Girls. There were countless things to do. I eyed my copy of Children of Dune and thought about picking it up, but my eyes were far too heavy for me to consume a page of literature. I was thirsty, I noticed. My throat was aching for a drink. Not one of water, though. The sweet liquid I desired was a Coke. I didn't have any in this house, and for some reason, I wanted one desperately. This was a thirst that could not wait until sunrise. This needed to happen now. I got out of bed and walked out of my house. I got into my car and drove out of the driveway. The gas station I wanted to visit was one that wasn't excessively far away. It was only 2 miles or so, and it did not take me long to get to it. In the inside was a multitude of aisles. There lay my desired drink. I decided to get a tank of gas along with my drink and soon found myself exposed in the open night, waiting for my tank to be refilled. It was then that I noticed the sounds of feet scuffling against stone. Across the street was a woman, nude and dancing. In any other circumstance, this would be a welcome sight, but the way she moved was as if her arms and legs were broken, and each step broke them more. She bent and bowed at odd angles, would jerk her arms and legs side to side, and then would shake her head inhumanly fast. She would occasionally get closer to me and then back further away. My tank finished filling and I put the nozzle away and got into the car and started in. Then there was the sound of loud footsteps coming quickly. I saw the woman suddenly turn her head toward me, and then she bent backwards with her face towards me, running towards my window. Just before she got close, I slammed my feet on the gas and drove away. I ran rather than walked to my door, and as I put the key into the door, I swear something was watching me. I went back into my room and closed my door. I somehow fell asleep with the lights back on, and when I next woke, I swore that what had happened was a dream. I stayed in bed, gazing up at the ceiling for a bit, laughing for a moment about my foolishness. I must have never awoken the first time, and it had all just been a dream. For a moment, my fears were gone, and I was able to breathe a bit easier. I stretched and my arm touched something cold on my desk. It was a soda can. I then realized what had woken me up. The sound of something hitting the window a few feet from my bed. Unable to move, I stared at the window, feeling something wrong. I got up, painfully aware of the loudness of my footsteps. I opened one of the window blinds, and on the other side, it was her. The woman I saw across from the gas station. Her face was against the window, skin as pale as the white moon. Her features were smudged against the glass. Her eyes were wide. Like a spider, she rolled up from the window and disappeared from sight. How many of us lazy 20-something-year-olds order delivery on a Friday night? I know I'm not the only one. Tonight's order is seriously making me rethink my choices, and I'm actually a little concerned for my safety. This is what happened. Skip the dishes is my vice. It's so convenient that I don't even really think about the expense. After a long day at work, I decided to order in for the night. Now, don't get me wrong. I have my own car and I can just as easily drive around town to pick up what I want to save some extra cash, but after an extremely stressful day, I poured a glass of red as soon as I walked through the door. I am responsible enough to know that I shouldn't drive. Hence, skip the dishes was my bright idea tonight. Since my boyfriend is working late, I texted him to see what he wanted me to order for us. His immediate response was, Get some wine. I'll even pay. And this is where the trouble starts. I ordered some food from a restaurant and ordered 2 nice bottles of wine to go with it. The problem with ordering alcohol online is that you are expected to meet face to face with the delivery person in order to show ID. I've been so used to COVID protocol where I can sneakily pick up my order at a no-contact drop-off location that this made my hermit self a little uneasy. A requirement for showing ID is that the name on your order must also match the name on the ID that is shown in person. As a young, fragile female living in an apartment complex in a bad area, I always had a fake name on my orders for my own peace of mind. For this instance, I had to write my real name. This was strike number 2 on my uneasy radar. About half an hour goes by until I see that my order is matched up with the driver. The driver's name is Michael. As I texted my boyfriend an update, I told him, Michael is on the way here. Michael Myers. Of course, this Halloween-themed joke was just my way of expressing my nerves in a playful manner. By no means was I actually expecting a monster to show up at my door. I get the heads up, your courier is about to arrive text, so I dart to the window to see what the guy looks like before he makes his way up to my unit. Michael steps out of his vehicle, and I can see from the 8th floor that he drives an old beat-up silver Honda Accord. He's a white male, early 40s, with large rimmed glasses. I see him grab the bag from his passenger seat and walk toward the door, ready for me to buzz him in. This is fine. This guy seems normal. We'll have a quick exchange, and then I'll go safely back into my apartment for the night. Told myself. I threw on an oversized sweater and sweatpants so as to make myself look uninviting and unattractive. If you're a female, then you understand. And I stepped outside my unit door, ready for my food with my ID in hand. The second I heard the elevator bell ring, I braced myself. He caught me off guard as he stepped out, walked toward me quickly and said, "Hello, Sarah." As if he'd known me my whole life. Somehow he even knew which direction to start walking when he arrived at my floor. Shyly I responded, "Hello, here's my ID." I presented him with my driver's license and snatched it quickly from my hand, but tried to play it off that he was just a nice guy joking around. "Beautiful. Let me see the eyes." "Ah, yes." He went on examining my facial features alongside my license picture. "Let me double check this," he says. He must have spent a solid minute scanning my license as if he was memorizing my information. "Okay, you're all good. Here you go." He handed me my order. I thanked him and rushed inside, locking the door behind me. Oof, thought I was safe. Aside from being a little weird and a little creepy, I thought nothing of it. I brought my order to the kitchen, arranged myself a plate, and plopped myself back down on the couch in front of my Netflix show. I jokingly texted my boyfriend that I had escaped the wrath of Michael, and that this was some delicious grub waiting patiently at home for him. About 40 minutes go by and the episode I was watching ends. I got up to bring my dishes back to the kitchen when I heard the tiniest little shuffling sound outside my door. Thinking maybe I had an Amazon delivery dropped off, or maybe a neighbor was walking down the hallway, I decided to look outside my peephole. I let out an audible gasp and dropped my fork, the metal ringing against the floor. Michael didn't leave. In fact, my eye was met with his, peering back through the hole into my apartment. "What the fuck?" I exclaimed. I literally sat here this entire time thinking I was safe and sound, while behind me some guy had his face pressed up against my door. "What do you want?" I shouted, becoming more angry than scared at this point. Who does this creep think he is? No response. "Please leave. I have my order and there's no reason for you to still be here. I will call the cops." I built up the courage to look back through the peephole, While shaking and trying to be quiet, I positioned my eye into the scope. He was still there, staring blankly at my door. What the hell is he doing? I thought. He took a step back, bent down, and then walked out of sight. I pulled out my phone to call my boyfriend and let him know what was going on, when I spotted a little piece of paper that was slid under my door. As I grabbed the paper, a chill ran down my spine. I'm coming back, it read. I was alone when I got here. It was 6 p.m., 7 p.m. perhaps. The sun was just setting. For context, I run an abandoned building exploration YouTube channel. I just use my phone to record. No fancy equipment or anything. Well, tonight I come across an empty mall. These have gotten more popular lately with all the talk about liminal spaces, creepy vibes, backrooms, you know. So I have a look around and it seems pretty recently decommissioned. Nothing is particularly old or worn down yet. Quite a few of the lights in the mall are still on, just dimly lit, as if they're on some backup battery, draining away until they die. I find an elevator and see that the up and down arrows are still lit, albeit dimly. I wonder if it still works. Yep, really insatiably curious. I press the button and I'm shocked to be responded to by a ding. A ding and nothing. I press it again and again. I kinda spammed it, but whatever. I eventually hear some sort of inner workings and the doors slide open extremely slow. I'm talking comically slow. Only it was a bit less comical and a bit more creepy, given the context. That doesn't matter. I need content for my channel. I get in the elevator and hit the lowest button on the panel. Basement. It's dark. I'll just peek around the corner with my phone flashlight and go back up. Honestly, I just want the thumbnail. That alone will work. The elevator creaks and whirs down about 2 floors, I'm assuming, and stops. I notice that my heart is beating pretty quickly. My nerves probably, but I also had an energy drink. I snap out of thinking about my heart rate and realize the door hasn't opened. Right. I hit the button that looks like the open button, and the door is open, again in a painfully slow manner. It's just not dark. Just a normal basement, dimly lit like the rest of the mall. I step out of the elevator and point my phone around the concrete halls. Blue painted concrete walls, janitorial stuff lying around, gently humming lights on the ceilings. I actually considered exploring a bit, but forgot it. I decided to play it safe and go back up. I get in the elevator. The doors had never closed. Hit the button. Nothing. I spam it. Nothing. My heart sinks a bit. Spam it some more. Wait a bit. Still no response. I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid. I'm so screwed. I curse for about a minute as my heart rate elevates once again, and I walk in circles holding my head like a moron, until I realize there has to be a staircase. Fire regulations exist. They can't just make a basement with no exit other than an elevator. Okay. I hurry around the concrete halls and realize it's less of a basement and more of a bunch of basements connected by hallways. B4, B6, B5. I see these little numbered signs and am both amused and angered that they help none. No arrows. Nothing. Aren't they supposed to have exit signs? I narrate to my video that I really want to find a way up now. I'm getting scared. You know those dim lights I mentioned? They almost seem to be getting dimmer. They are. They are getting dimmer. You've got to be kidding. I had just noticed how low my battery was when I heard the worst sound I've ever heard. The sound of all of the power dying. The sound of every light turning off at once. Clicks and silence. Pitch black silence. And the light from my soon-to-be useless phone screen lighting up my stupid, sweaty face. My phone is going to die soon. This is my last post. I realize I'm going to have to feel my way around until I hopefully find some sort of exit. My mind is playing with me too. I keep thinking I heard a noise from down the hallway. No. Wait. I definitely heard a noise. Last year, in around the middle of October, when the weather was turning from a slight chill to a crisp shiver, and the fiery oranges and yellows of the leaves were dulling and falling, a group of friends and I found something in the woods that shouldn't have been there. To give some context, a couple months ago I went to take pictures in the woods with my class. I was on a field trip with my photography class to take pictures in the local forest preserve. As long as we stayed in the group with a teacher, we had free reign of the woods to take pictures from various angles. Our teachers soon got sick of a bunch of high school freshmen climbing trees and scaring each other, so they turned the assignment into a group project. Each group had 3 kids, and as long as we all joined a Life 360 and kept our location on at all times, we were allowed to explore to our heart's content. I was paired with 2 of my friends, Jonathan and Kat. We had 2 or 3 hours to kill, so we stepped off the main path and began to explore. It was a foggy day, and our photography unit was for Halloween movie posters, so the misty, autumn aesthetic was a perfect setting. Forts made of branches by children and fallen trees with moss growing were popular amongst the students, so we wanted to find something unique. In hindsight, those teachers were incredibly stupid for sending 20 or so teenagers out into the woods by themselves. Someone was bound to injure themselves, and unfortunately, it was me. Kat, John, and I took pictures as we explored, and then found a staircase leading to nowhere in the middle of a clearing. The concrete stairs were absolutely pristine, like they were recently built, but that couldn't have been right. If they were part of a scrapped construction project, there should have been more to it, like a foundation or a platform or even a support beam. We thought nothing of it and saw the perfect opportunity to take some unique pictures and hope no one else would find the spot after we left. Once we found the spot, we started taking pictures. I heard John mumble to himself, "It would be cool if someone sat at the top for a picture." "Oh dude, that would be so cool," I responded. "Who wants to climb up there?" Cue cricket sound effects. Kat broke the silence. "I don't know, they are kind of creepy, aren't they? How they're just here alone?" "Well, yeah, but it would be such a cool picture." "Then how about you, John?" I offered. "What? No, I can't do that. I'm much better off taking photos from the ground." "Well, you were the one that had the idea." A short argument preceded a quick game of bubblegum in a dish, and I was the only one left. I groaned a bit, but I started climbing up the stairs. It took longer than expected to walk up 10 feet of stairs. It felt like 15 minutes before I reached the top. And when I finally did and looked around me, it seemed like everything was drained of its life. The once perfect stairs had cracks running along the steps and corners crumbling. I cut my hand on the rusty metal railing and the tree line seemed to wither in front of me. Everything was silent. The accompanying sound of birds ceased, and I couldn't hear the frigid wind that started blowing around me. What was worse is that I couldn't see or hear my friends below me. "Guys, where'd you go?" My own echoes were my only answer. "John, Kat, this isn't funny." I scanned the dead tree line only to find nothing but husks of once lively pines. I was starting to get creeped out. Suddenly, a tall, lanky, humanoid figure peeked from behind a tree. When I say tall, I mean like as tall as the towering tree it was hiding behind. Its cold, glowing eyes seemed to freeze me where I stood. It stretched its long legs towards the stairs and moseyed halfway to me before I broke out of my sudden panic. I bolted down the stairs, skipping 3 at a time. It felt like forever until I reached the bottom. As soon as I reached the dirt below me, it turned to grass. All the sounds of the forest rushed back to me, and everything sprung back to life. Emery? What the hell? Kay's voice rang out. John's joined her. We were calling your name. Where did you go? What do you mean? I couldn't hear. Come on, we have to go. We're 20 minutes late and my phone's blowing up. Kat grabbed my wrist and dragged me out. As soon as we were a few feet from the clearing, I stole a glance back to find nothing but densely packed trees. The staircase was gone, as well as the 30-foot radius it stood in. It was like the clearing and staircase had never existed in the first place. I felt the pain in my hand seize as the cut healed before my eyes. When we caught up to the rest of the class, we weren't the only ones who were late. Other groups burst from the trees with their cameras as soon as we returned. Since there were too many students that arrived late, we got off without a detention, but our projects would have 5 points taken off when we turn it in. On the bus, I sat with John and Kat, and we overlooked our photos. All the pictures of the clearing with the staircase disappeared, and were somehow deleted from the recently deleted folder. John and Kat ruled it up to a glitch, but I knew that it had to be more than that. I was still confused about the whole event, but I wanted to forget about the glowing eyes on the shadowy figure from the tree line. The eyes that pierced through my skin and sent ice into my soul. We used a picture from one of the previous photo shoots before the staircase. The project earned a B+, and we took it. Kat and John wanted to go find the stairs again a few weeks later, but I didn't go with for obvious reasons. They couldn't retrace their steps back to the clearing, and soon forgot about the whole ordeal. But I can never forget those cold, petrifying eyes. Now, whenever I see a tree, I'm scared I'll see the tall, lanky figure staring back at me. I still don't know what exactly happened that day, but I've come to the conclusion that I'm never going back there. Even if the stairs disappeared when we left, I'm never stepping a foot into that forest again. I'm writing this as a last-ditch attempt, and I'm a bit rushed for time, so I'm sorry if this is a bit jumbled as it's almost midnight. Right, I need to give you some context. I've lived in New Zealand all my life, never staying in one town or city very long. But one thing I always told myself was I would never return to my hometown of Lathven, a small town situated right under a well-renowned ski field. I'm getting off track. One thing I was always curious about was the disappearances. Every night at exactly midnight, a shriek, scream. I don't know how to explain it. Something between a dying cougar and a wolf's howl. Regardless of what it sounds like, it really scared the shit out of me as a child. But eventually we got used to it. One thing I never got used to, however, was the fact that every night, a few minutes after the ominous howl, a shriek could be heard. A very, very human shriek, but never the same. Sometimes it sounded young, sometimes old, and a person fitting the shriek was always gone by the time dawn rose. I never truly questioned it though, thinking maybe it was some animal that sounded human and could mimic. That alone was scary enough for a 5-year-old, but what truly made it sink in was what was happening was when I was in year 6, 5th grade for you Americans. My best friend Tim disappeared after a very loud childlike scream had been heard the night before. You see, he lived next door to me. That's how we met after our fathers went to a barbecue and started talking. After that, we were inseparable. I think I finally realized that day that what my naive self had believed to be people moving away wasn't the case, and that my parents had told me that to calm my young mind. That dawning realization was the day I vowed I'd leave as soon as possible and never return. But first, I needed answers. Quickly, I found that no one was going to be volunteering any information, and certainly not my parents. I never did find out much from my snooping, but I think at some point or another, I lost interest and just accepted it. I grieved my friend and moved on after that, but the dread within me never went away. It never settled no matter how many nights I was awoken by screams. I didn't wake every night, as sometimes the screams were further or closer away. I was 18 when it happened. I jolted awake and was instantly on my feet when I heard the terrible howl. It was right outside, likely in our backyard. Now was my chance. I dashed over to my window, adrenaline pumping, but when I got there, nothing. I went to lay back in bed, heart thumping still when I heard a creak. It was barely noticeable, but it was there. Normally I'd assume it was normal house noises, as there was a slight breeze outside, but this was not a normal night. The howl, or whatever it was, had never sounded that close. I sat up, too scared to move. I felt like a 5-year-old child once again, all the fear bubbling back up. What happened next is something I'll never forget. In moments, I was out of bed, grabbing my baseball bat and storming into the hallway. My ears rang from the loud, fear-stricken cry I had heard come from my parents' room. I ran in to see my mother huddled in the corner, curled in a ball and shaking, tears dripping from her eyes, her hollow eyes. I don't know what she saw, but after that day, it was never the same. I went to the police the next day to file for a missing persons, but I knew nothing would come of it. My father, the one who taught me to shave, the one who brought me my first beer, and my first suit, he was now a memory. A painful memory that I'd be reminded of every time I saw his face on the community board. Big red words reading "missing" underneath. We all knew that he wouldn't be found, though. The police didn't even look anymore, because they never found anything. The last time I saw my mother was 2 days after my father was taken. She was being put in the hospital for a psych evaluation at my request. I will admit that I don't know how it went, because that day I had packed my bags and I was gone. I do still feel bad to this day, but do I regret it? No. After I left town, I had nothing but bad luck. No one would hire me, and I ended up homeless for a while. Then we flicked to almost a month ago, and I broke my vow and came crawling straight back to this hell. Anyway, this is plenty of backstory. Now, you may be wondering, how do I know I am next? This thing is methodical, and it seems to be smart. It goes down street by street, house by house, but never in perfect order. Probably to still have the element of surprise, but it never does the same house more than once every few months. It's almost like it farms us, and despite the number of witnesses, we still know almost nothing about this hellhound. Most of the witnesses are so traumatized in the moment that they bite off their tongue, or at very least are so deeply disturbed they refuse to talk about the topic and will shut down at the very mention of it. One new thing to note in this town is a new church of sorts. I haven't been, but it is more popular than Christianity in this town. It is settled in an old Victorian-style chapel just a few streets down from my parents' house. They call themselves the Silent Ones. They seem to worship the evil that stalks this town, but to join you have to have had a family taken. The ones who see this thing are considered chosen and make up the majority of the priests, hence the name. I refuse to step foot in those doors. I've never been a religious person, and I sure as hell am not going to worship the creature that preys upon this cursed town. When I got back, I was told by an old family friend, one of the town's elders, that my mother had been taken by it a few months back. I couldn't even say I was surprised. It got everyone eventually, even the members of the Silent Ones, it seemed. The only people it didn't seem to take were pregnant. Couldn't have itself kill the source of its future food, could it? I've been here for just over 2 weeks now. I am living in my old home, and even the slightest noise wakes me in a complete panic. The last few nights I haven't even slept, running on monsters and coffee. Every night I hear it loom closer and closer, slowly taking people from my street again, and I just know I'm next. And if not, it will happen. Every house has one taken once every rotation. I have a few things to help me for when that creature comes knocking. I brought myself a hunting rifle. It's only meant for rabbits, but it's something. At this rate, though, I may end up just using it on myself. I'm so scared, guys. I can't let it take me too. Here's what I know about this creature. It is lean and... Oh, no. No, not tonight. Please. I just heard its banshee scream from outside my window. It seems I've run out of time. Someone please help me. I just know this gun is useless. I'm going to post this now. I can hear something creeping through the house just out of sight. I've got my gun loaded and now all I can do is pray. If I don't reply to this post by morning, no, I didn't go missing. You know the truth. Wish me luck. To be honest, I'm not as freaked out about this as I should be. After all, I'm used to staying indoors at this point. I'm pretty sure I'm safe, but boy, I wasn't expecting to walk into a mess like this. Lately, I've been feeling really down on life. I'm not sure I'm not alone in this regard. Between the pandemic, climate change, and the next world war right on the horizon, many people's perspective on reality is at an all-time low. One of my favorite means of escape lately has been binge watching paranormal stuff on YouTube. If you don't know, researching the paranormal on the internet is beyond rabbit hole territory. Think gigantic underground prairie dog city. As much as I kept telling myself to approach things with skepticism and rational, scientific thought, the idea of other forces out there engaged in a battle for humanity really seems to take the edge of the mundane, existential crisis we're all living in. For some reason, however, I've been feeling the urge to fight back. A part of me really wants to help save the world, which, again, I'm sure is a feeling many of us have. I've been starting small, donating to a few charities here and there, taking the bus more, eating less meat, the usual. But my fantasy is to do something big that motivates people to try to make the world a better place. Yeah, sure. Just on a whim, however, I decided to do something funny on Ask Reddit. I'd been getting into contactees, people who claim to be in direct contact with extraterrestrial beings. I normally consider these guys scam artists who use their imaginations to rake in money from gullible people. However, I'm willing to admit some of the narratives actually get to me, especially when they start talking about relatable themes like world peace, loving each other, and not trusting authority. I decided, well, heck, if they can talk to aliens, why can't I? I pose a question, something along the lines of ETs of Reddit. What can we do to turn this shit around? Most of the comments were about what I expected. I think the funniest comment was something like, "You are shitting out the correct end. Do not turn it around." Bless you, kind comedian. Yes, most of the comments were joke comments and some Star Trek references. The thread itself was nothing special, although it did garner over 40 responses and something like 9,000 views. It didn't make it to the top of the voting charts, however, and it eventually got taken down, which is related to where the weirdness begins. You see, there were some comments that were popping up and then quickly being deleted. I got notifications of them appearing, but they would disappear. That isn't all that unusual. Sometimes people change their minds about things. Other times the moderators delete an especially unpopular comment. But I noticed a pattern with the comments that were disappearing. They were all serious, canny responses. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to take screenshots. More on that in a bit. But I have a pretty good memory and I was able to copy and paste a few of them too. The usernames were random numbers and letters. Here was one on the list. Your obsession with apocalypses is kind of unusual. The downfall of our species is just as likely to be painfully slow as it is to be sudden and violent. You need to work hard on improving yourself and your relationship with the planet regardless of whether or not the end comes quickly or slowly. Either way, you'll never get to experience traveling the stars. And believe me, traveling the stars is worth it. I was actually pretty flattered to get a nice response like this. I thought, hey, someone is really getting into the alien roleplay. They even made a weird username just to throw me off, and the comment actually made me go, you have a point there. Here's another one that I liked. Have a stronger baseline for what normal is. Peaceful, happy relationships between men, women, children, and the elderly are normal. Lands full of insects, birds, and other animals are normal. Oceans full of fish and not plastic are normal. Really try to see your current human condition as abnormal. As in, there does exist a normal, and this is not it. Good old liberal Redditor. But again, this was something I agreed with. It also had a weird username with no other post attached to it. So I was thinking maybe it was the same guy or girl. At least, at first, I did. Then I saw one like this. Stop asking us for help. My species is not interested in helping you. We have our own problems to deal with. There are some benevolent extraterrestrialists that are interested in helping you, but for various complicated reasons, they are not really allowed to. One bit of advice. Not all alien civilizations you encounter will be friendly. Be self-reliant, or some civilizations will prey on you and take advantage of your cowardice. You do not want to be slaves to any kind of so-called saviors. That came out of left field. And it was the first one that I decided to try to screenshot and send to a friend of mine to check out. For some reason, the file wouldn't send. I tried uploading it on Imgur, and that didn't work either. I sent the actual thread to her, which, bless her heart, she thought it was funny. And while she was able to see all the regular joke comments, the serious ones didn't show up for her. She didn't say it, but I think she probably thinks I'm a little crazy now. It's probably not wrong, to be honest. There were strange usernames responding to each other too. What was really funny was that some of them were very human-like and followed a human sense of humor. To be honest, a lot of what your species is going through is normal, in the sense that it is part of your growth phase. I think it would help to have a goal for what you want your world to be like in the future and slowly build up long-term solutions towards achieving that vision. Do you want to see all your people fed? Do you want to transition away from money-based economies? Do you want free energy for all? It's really up to you to decide what you want the world to be like. Followed by, found a communist. And then the first odd username. Living in a post-scarcity world doesn't make me a communist. And finally, No, but it does make you a hippie. Okay. I definitely thought someone was fucking with me, but again, my attempts to screenshot the conversation failed. At best, I was able to copy and paste some of them before they got deleted. There was one conversation which really hurt me, especially as a former gifted kid with a gaming addiction. Most of your advanced nations are vastly overstimulated. Your minds are overworked and undernourished. Take more time to relax and get away from digital screens. Read more books. Spend more time talking with family. Bosses and CEOs, take better care of your employees. Meditate and exercise more. Eat healthier. The default emotional state should be calm and readiness, not anxiety or depression. Then, every addicted video gamer is a hero who has given up on saving the real world and would rather save a fake one. Oof. Then, Sims players and people who kill children in Skyrim using mods, because the game normally doesn't let you do that, might disagree. The one from before replied, "It's also a valid response to burn a fake world because you feel helpless in the real one." And the biggest gut punch of all was, humans are addicted to video games because they follow an ideal, educational model. They challenge you with exactly what you can handle and do not allow you to progress until you can meet their challenge. They are fully customized and efficient. Humans spend more time perfecting colorful dopamine generators for profit than their high schools and universities. And that's pretty sad. I've scheduled an appointment with a therapist for next week. At one point, the responses were coming in so quickly I couldn't save them all. All of them were from unique usernames which looked randomized. There was no way a single person was doing this. I started to think I was losing my mind. Some of them were kind of short. Love yourself and each other. It really shouldn't be that complicated. Religions should be based on compassion and evidence. Also, yes, there is an afterlife. Not going to tell you how that works. You have other things to worry about. LOL. And there are more elaborate conversations with stuff I hadn't even thought of or heard about. This might be asking for a lot, but try removing all the lead in your pipes. Really try removing all the plastics in your life system. Get rid of parasites like toxoplasmosis. And from now on, design cities compassionately with human behavior in mind. Have realistic expectations of birth control and population growth and decline. All these things are taxing human psyches across the world, both physically and psychologically. Basically, you're all slowly becoming insane. You are poisoning your minds, and it needs to stop. Their immune systems evolved to coexist with parasites. I'm not sure getting rid of toxoplasmosis is worth it. There are worse things than being slightly crazier and being nicer to cats. Oh shit, you're right. But an immune response is the brain cannot possibly be good for half the human population. I'd probably take increased sanity levels over not being able to eat strawberries. Maybe they should make gene sequencing tech more affordable so everyone can see what autoimmune responses they are susceptible to, and find/engineer a relatively harmless parasite as a treatment for some allergies. Knowing humans, this would be how the zombie apocalypse happens. Hey, at least that would solve their overpopulation problem. And like I said, some of them were surprisingly funny. Easy. Have the good half, eat the evil half. Found the reptilian. Oh, go shave your pubic hairs. Go eat a live baby bird. I think this one was one of the saddest ones. My people were friends with some of the indigenous people on your North American continent. They are mostly extinct now. We're actually bitter about that, and we're not really sure we've forgiven the rest of your kind for what happened. I know it's not really your fault, but there is a karmic imbalance that is difficult for us to resolve. Honestly, if you want to improve yourselves, study your history and face the harsh realities you find with courage and understanding. Yes, I accept the downvotes. Not that there were any downvotes, because the message, like all the others, was quickly deleted. There were so many different ideas and perspectives, I was really becoming convinced they couldn't all be coming from the same person. Some of them had contradictory advice. A lot of responses were suggesting we make a beeline for FTL travel. But then there was this. What I am about to say might be downvoted by a lot of the posters here, but here it goes. You don't need to travel the stars. You don't need to be so tech-centered. You don't need so much technology. Master living in your home world. The universe will always be there waiting for you. There is no rush. If I had to pick something techie to focus on, maybe harden yourselves against natural disasters, or find ways to dodge them. Once again, never got to be downvoted. I didn't sleep much that night. I posted this because I was trying to compile as many responses as possible before they got deleted. There were expected responses like how ridiculous money and homelessness are. Yeah, sure, 90% of Redditors would agree with those. But I also got some weird ones about how we're doing childbirth wrong, how AI is a good thing, how some alien civilizations are actually very religious, overpopulation is a myth, etc. Lots of answers I wouldn't have expected from the average Redditor. I think it was at this point that I started to become really nervous. Right before the thread was deleted by the moderators, I got this last one which made me feel a bit better. Advanced alien races are not perfect either. We have various problems of our own. Many of us were like you once. There are many different pieces of advice we can give, and I think most of them are valid. My personal one? Never give up. Believe in yourselves and the ability to shape the world in a positive way. That is what I offer. Words of encouragement from an outside source. You can do it. I thought, aw, that's sweet. I was even going to make a desperate attempt to contact them and thank them. Every other attempt at messaging the strange usernames was met with an error message when I was interrupted by a message in my inbox. I go to click on it, hoping to receive confirmation that this was some sort of prank. Unfortunately, that's not what I got. Instead, what I got was this. We can protect you as long as you don't let them in the front door. Don't worry. Your life will be back to normal in 3 days. If you do need to leave the house, avoid the white vans. You'll know them when you see them. Never do this again. It was about this time when the thread was taken down, and when I started getting knocks on my front door. Okay, so maybe I'm a little more freaked out than I thought I was. Every once in a while I work up the courage to check the peephole. They're really tall, have pale skin, and are dressed head to toe in black. Even though it's cloudy outside, they always have sunglasses. Today is January 31st, 2022. There are 5,950 days until May 17th, 2038. It seems like yesterday that it was December 12th, 2021, almost 2 months ago. The 17th of May was 6,000 days away. That was the third milestone in the thousands, and there are still 5 more to go. 50 days feels like yesterday, and 2,544 days feels like a lifetime. That date was February 13th, 2015. 9 days before that was the 4th, and unbeknownst to me, there were 8,494 days until that date. May 17th, 2038. The 137th day of the year. The 20th Monday of the year. 5,950 days. 850 weeks. May 17th, 2038. On the 4th of February, the 5th Wednesday of 2015, I was almost 18 and volunteering for a nursing home after school. I had been doing so for 5 months at that point. I wanted to be a sociologist, and I figured that spending time with society's most vulnerable people would be a good experience to put on a college application. I wanted to go out of state, to one of the big boys, Harvard, Oxford, Stanford. I didn't want to be stuck in such a small town on such a big planet. I was leaving the building that day, walking along the short path back to the neighborhood, and it was there, by the base of a stump that was just 10 or so feet off the edge of the path. That is where I found them. I was walking fast, and if I was just looking over the hill, or up at the sky, or anywhere but where I was, I probably would have missed them. What I found was a pair of glasses, with a green rim and blue temples. I picked them up because I was hoping they would be a close prescription to my own. I never liked the glasses my parents made me wear. They were gray and lifeless. I wanted color. I wanted vibrancy. I put them on and they were close. Not perfect, but close enough. I couldn't believe my luck. There was no one around and the glasses were in such great condition. Who would toss them away? I guess someone could have misplaced them, but even if I decide to return them, I still had to keep them safe. I pocketed them and figured I'd wear them tomorrow. My parents wouldn't understand, but I knew someone who would. The next day, February 5th, on the 6th Thursday of 2015, I went to the nursing home after school. Once there, I paid a visit to my favorite resident, a 95-year-old woman named Virginia. That's not her real name for the sake of anonymity, but her name was just as fitting. She was born on the very first day of the 20s, back when there was only one 20s that people could remember. She was senile, she was cranky, and she could tell the best damn story you ever heard. Her husband, a man so old that he could have been delivered by Susan B. Anthony herself, was drafted into the Second World War at the age of 38 and never came home. She never remarried and in fact divorced every fuck she could ever give about anything. She was the most honest person I knew, even if she couldn't always be aware of it. She hated people, but she liked me. I wanted to show her my glasses because I knew she'd understand. And so I put them on before walking in her room. That's when it first happened. As I walked in, I saw her son Sammy was by her side. The last family member she had, and the only other person besides myself who she had any sort of caring relationship with. He came every Tuesday and Thursday, so I wasn't surprised. What did mystify me, though, were the red numbers floating above their heads. They were bright neon, almost like the display of a digital alarm clock, just without the segmentation of the numbers. They each had one series of numbers above them, and as they would move their heads, the numbers would move too. I must have been petrified for a solid half-minute. It wasn't until Sammy spoke up that I snapped out of it. I was beyond confused, but I had the sense to let it roll over for now. I took the glasses off and apologized. I don't remember the excuse I gave, but I do remember the look he gave me after. A look so puzzled that I could see the pronounced wrinkles through the blur. I said hello to Virginia, and she told me she wanted to see the new glasses I had just stashed away for seemingly no reason. I took an internal deep breath and put them on without hesitation. If something bad is happening to me, I don't want others to get involved. I slid them on, and the numbers appeared once more. I stayed for a few minutes and went on with my daily tasks. I kept the glasses off except for when I was with Virginia. Near the end of the day, I had memorized the numbers for both of them. Virginia's was 020515, and Sammy's was 021015. I had a love for numbers back then, and I recognized each set of 6 digits as a date. Virginia's number was today, and Sammy's was 5 days from now. I finished my work, said goodbye, went home, and put those glasses in my top dresser drawer. I had no idea what was going on with those glasses, and I tried to forget the incident even happened. Being smart is knowing when to observe and when to ignore, and back then, I knew damn well to ignore things that were making my life a mockery. Friday came, school went, and I made my way back to the home. To my sorrow, Virginia had passed the night before in her sleep. I had only been volunteering since September, but I saw my fair share of deaths up to that point. Virginia wasn't even the first resident I grew attached to. I guess because of this, I was able to get through the day fairly normally. I didn't come in on Saturdays and Sundays, and I decided I'd do the same for Monday, and Tuesday, and Wednesday. I could believe she was gone, but I couldn't handle it just yet. I came back on Thursday, and there was a more somber atmosphere than usual. I didn't mention anything until I was about to leave, when I bit the bullet and asked what was going on. It's a sick choice of words to use, though, because I was informed that Sammy had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was a favorite of the staff, along with other residents, so everything clicked into place. I was told he had done it 2 days prior on the 10th. The dots hadn't connected in my head, and I was no longer thinking about any stupid glasses. That's until I got home. I came in, went up the stairs to my room, and had turned the TV on. I had hooked up my childhood VCR, and I grabbed the one thing that could make me laugh no matter what. George Carlin. I was a big fan of his, and even now, he's still one of the only things that can consistently bring me joy. My dad had given me some of his old tapes from the 90s. Sentimental value always overtook the convenience of YouTube for me. I had decided Carlin was just what I needed at this night, a night which would later feel like an eternity. I grabbed a random tape, which happened to be You Are All Diseased. I had it running for a couple minutes when I paused to take a piss. While doing such, I started thinking about the glasses again, and upon returning to my room, I took them out. I couldn't stop myself, as I was just so curious about them. I said before that I knew when to observe and when to ignore. Sadly, I was just feeling a bit stupid. I put them on, and not a single number appeared anywhere. I waited for 5 minutes, looking at every picture around my room, just waiting for them to show up, but nothing. They didn't even show up in my reflection. I gave up, not knowing whether or not to feel relief. I kept them on and resumed the show, but as I did so, the footage started playing. The numbers returned, not over the head of any human present, but over George Carlin. They were in the TV and they followed him, yet they didn't look like they belonged. Compared to the grainy quality of the tape, the numbers were clear and vibrant as ever, but they were in the TV, and even went partially out of frame on some shots. It was then that I paid attention to the numbers. 062208. I said before that I used to enjoy numbers, and when you love numbers, you tend to know a lot of dates. June 22nd, 2008, a time where we were a whole 10,921 days away from May 17th, is the day George Carlin died. It was at that very moment that I remembered the numbers above Virginia and Sammy. I made the same realization that you've made already. These red numbers were death dates. I didn't and still don't know much about the numbers. I don't know if they can ever change. I don't know how they were in the TV. I don't know how my reflection didn't have them. And I don't know why they only appeared when I unpaused the TV. I assume for the same reason they don't appear over photos. It was at this moment where I felt sick. If my room wasn't connected to the bathroom, I would have puked right there. Even still, I barely made it. The next couple hours are a blur. I feel like I went through every single possible thought one could have about such glasses. But I realized something. I wasn't scared of these glasses, nor was I concerned with them. All I was curious. That night took an eternity, and it wasn't because I was dreading tomorrow, but because I couldn't wait. I had to test these out in the wild, and when I went to school Friday morning, the 7th Friday of the year, I had no other intentions than to use them on my peers. But as I thought about the prospect of doing so, I got cold feet. My brain wanted to know what the fuck I was about to do, but every other cell in my body needed to know. I decided to do a little trial round. I started by only looking at people who already passed. I tried Kennedy, I tried Lenin, I tried Hitler, I tried Cobain, I tried Monroe. I did so many people, and every single one was correct. A few of the dates were actually off from what Google told me, however. I quickly realized it was because it did each date as if it was in Central Time, my personal time zone. My intrigue finally got the best of me, and I finally looked at when some people were going to die. Granted, I only did old celebrities, people who were on their way out anyway. I figured it would soften any impact this information would have on me. Not all of them have died. Chomsky stays around longer than you'd think, but a good portion of them have. I knew Fidel Castro was gonna die on 112516. I knew Doris Day was gonna die on 051319, and I was the first one to know that both Prince Philip and Betty White died painfully close to their 100th birthday. The one that really affected me was Christopher Lee, not because I'm a particularly big Lord of the Rings fan, but because it was less than 4 months away. I had pumped myself up, and I was more determined than anyone else in the world. I needed to finally put it to practical use. I had to pick a target, someone who I didn't care about. I picked Aaron, the biggest cum stain in the school. He never touched me or even laid eyes my way, as most people don't, but he did make life a living hell for so many students. Most of them were some of the only people who had treated me right. I followed him to a mostly empty hallway, got into a position where he was the only guy I could see, and put the glasses on. 030918. This time, I truly did feel sick, and it didn't go away. I haven't done much the past 7 years, but one thing I did, the one thing I'm proud of, was try. I tried to do everything I could to keep that kid alive. I tried talking to him. I tried listening to him. I tried standing up for him. I tried everything I could possibly do to keep his heart pumping. I eventually did befriend him. He never got on drugs, and he never hit the bottle. Never got into a fight again. Never drove drunk. Never tried to beat a train. He went from almost getting expelled his senior year for assaulting a teacher to getting into a halfway decent college. And on March 9th, 2018, he died of a brain aneurysm. But that was later, and now is then. After seeing those numbers, I screamed so loudly that people outside the building reportedly heard it. I ran to the nearby water fountain and puked all the air out my gut. Due to last night, I had nothing to expel but regret, but it never went away. I had caused a scene, and it was at that moment where I made the worst mistake of my life. It wasn't cheating on a test in the 4th grade. It wasn't wasting my first 2 years of high school in an abusive relationship. It was turning around. What I saw were dozens of teenagers, and just as many numbers. And it was then that I saw a horror comprehensible in concept, but unimaginable in reality. 051738. 051738. You get the point. It was fucking everywhere. I saw 1 or 2 dates below, but almost all of them were nothing but 051738. It was a glowing red sea over the heads of the masses, and it couldn't be parted. I ran out the school. I don't remember how I didn't, or even where I exited, but sometime later I tripped in the woods. I was only a few miles from the school and the foliage not too far behind the building, but I felt like I was in a different realm of existence from anyone else. I sat there for a few hours and then pulled my phone out. I had no signal, but I had videos on my phone, particularly ones taken during a recent family reunion in Dallas, where my family and I went to Six Flags. I looked through those videos, not the ones that had me and my family, God no. I looked at all the strangers, the park attendants, the families, everyone I could find. Every single one had a number. I couldn't see every number since most of them were small, being over the heads of those in the background, but almost every number I saw was the exact same, 051738. Most of the ones with a different number were the elderly. It was then when it hit me, the fact that everyone, including me seemingly, was going to die in just a little over 23 years. I scrolled through my camera roll, checking for any other possible videos. Every video was the same, but one. In preparation for the upcoming 2016 election, I had been editing a music video about the various candidates that could run. I was going to post it to YouTube and everything, but it never happened. The video had a lot of past and current politicians in it. Most of the numbers were lower due to the old ages of these politicians, but there were still a good bit of 051731 throughout the various stock footage I had utilized, but it was different. Certain people in the video did not have that number, or even one lower. No, some had one higher. Obama's number wasn't 051738. It was 082249. Rand Paul's was 040940. Ted Cruz's was 120162. I've memorized the dates for almost every notable figure I saw with those glasses because they changed everything for me. I don't know what the fuck is going to happen on May 17th, 2038. Whatever it is. Some assholes and lucky sons of bitches must have gotten away. When I finished that video, I took those glasses off, threw them to the ground, took a rock, and I did to those glasses what they did to me. Shatter their perception of reality. On the outside, I lived a normal life for the next 5 years. February 13th was treated as a random mental snap. Despite everything I ever said in my life about my town, how it was a shithole, how it was in the middle of nowhere, how it had nothing to offer, it gave me help. My community gave me help. Did it fix me? No, largely because it wasn't something even explainable. I can only do the back and forth so much when I'm keeping the biggest secret in the world. But I was still better until 2020. When the virus happened, all the thoughts came back. Not even so much that we were all gonna die, but what the hell could be the cause of it? I always thought it was gonna be an asteroid or nuclear warfare. But could this be it? A virus that sweeps everywhere, killing everyone. I wonder about a lot of things. I wonder who had the glasses, why they left them there, how they work, and if I should have kept them. Maybe those glasses were the key to helping people not die so soon, and I was too scared to let them. For almost the past 2 years, I've been an even more hollow shell. I told everyone that could listen about what I saw and how I was with Aaron when he died because I knew something was going to happen, and how every day I live in fear and I count down the days. I've done plenty of damage, enough to where I don't think I can go back. As for now, though, I'm existing which is more than I can say to the me 5,950 days from now. I don't know how much longer I can manage to be around. A little over 16 years is a long time to go on like this. But at the same time, I feel I would be doing myself a disservice by not waiting. I've let 6 numbers change my entire outlook on reality. I need to know what the hell happens. Maybe it's the fucking rapture. And taking myself out would just leave me as one of the ones locked out. All I know is that I used to be stuck in a small town on a big planet. Now, though, I have all the space I could need within my own mind, and the scale of Earth appears to shrink almost as much as its future, one day at a time. My sister is 3 years younger than me, so ever since we were small, I've always looked out for her and tried to protect her. When we were young, I would always take charge and lead the way. That changed when we got older, though. When she turned 7, she started getting more sure of herself. Started taking charge, too. 10-year-old me wasn't happy. We started fighting around that age. Not actual fist fights, but a lot of intense arguments over Lego pieces. Whether to play hide and seek or catch. You know, serious issues. Her name is Sarah, by the way. She's 25 now, and she's a lawyer at a big shot law firm in Seattle. She's always been the smart one. I'm telling you about her because that's who I was thinking about when that day started. It started off a bit like any other day, actually. Normal life can be pretty boring sometimes. My alarm started ringing and I hastily and confidently hit snooze, but I couldn't go back to sleep. I remembered the dream I'd just woken up from. Playing with Hot Wheels on a newly built track on Christmas. It was a specific Christmas when I was 12. I had just built the track and started to drop the cars down it, pretending I was the driver. I asked my sister if she wanted to play too. She eagerly accepted. But after a couple of minutes of racing, she said we could change the game and instead pretend like we were police cars in a high-speed pursuit. I immediately accepted. I started to think about how I had lost that take charge attitude from when I was a little kid. Hell, today, I don't even say anything to people when they cut me in line at the supermarket. I wondered about my sister's role in that change in my personality. If me agreeing to play another game so automatically that day was the start of my insecurities and shyness, my passive response to everything. I always got introspective and start overanalyzing things in the mornings before I get up, but I'm usually over it by the time I get out of bed. And I did. Put on some clothes, and that's when I noticed a man on the square with glass on the wall. That lets you see. I also forgot words in the morning. Anyway, the man was walking alone. He wore blue jeans and a salmon-colored t-shirt with a large drawing of an avocado on it. I had the feeling I knew him. Maybe not know him, but I thought I had seen him before. I looked down for some shoes, and when I looked back up, the man was no longer there. I wondered about this man and about the subtle fear I felt when I saw him. I knew him. Maybe not. I finished getting ready. I was going to meet my sister for lunch. I got to the restaurant a little early. It was getting colder, I thought. My brown jacket wiggled with the subtle wind that passed by me, taking whatever shape the wind commanded. I thought about my passiveness again, how I was much like the jacket, flowing wherever others pushed me. I always overanalyze things when I'm waiting for someone, but I usually get over it pretty quickly. My sister's car pulled over. She got out and paid the meter, and then strolled towards me happily. I greeted her with a hug and a kiss on the cheek. Sarah said we should go inside. It was getting cold, after all. I nodded and started to move towards the door. That's when I glanced over my left shoulder. I don't know why I did, but I felt the urge to. I saw him again. The same man I saw in the morning. He was closer this time, on the other side of the street, walking alone like before. I felt like I knew him, but maybe not. As my eyes wandered somewhere else, he vanished. Just like earlier, I saw him only for a moment. There was something about him. He looked normal. Nothing special, but there was this aura around him. I couldn't quite figure out the reason for it, for this sense of fear he instilled in me. He looked hateful and calm at the same time. Angry, but composed. I tried to overanalyze things, I know that. We got to our table and started reading the menu immediately. I was hungry. Sarah did the same. We talked about what we were going to eat. I was on the fence. On one hand, the porterhouse looked good. Dry-aged, 20 ounces. Good size for the price, but my sister noticed they had a tasting menu. She noted that we would get to try more things if we ordered it. She was right, and so that's what we ordered. I noticed the man again, this time through the window next to the entrance. He had crossed the street. He was looking angrier, more hateful than before. I knew him. I was starting to realize that. Well, maybe not. He looked sure of himself, unlike me. I never looked sure of myself at all. Always let someone else take the lead. Content to watch life as secondary character. Not even that, actually. If I'm being honest, I'm more like an NPC. My interactions with others were few and devoid of meaning, except with my sister. She is my younger sister after all, and I always tried to protect her. The man was gone again, just like before I saw him, only for a moment. His intentions remained a mystery to me, but I could feel his hatred simmering, slowly and gradually increasing. He wasn't there anymore, but I still felt his somber presence. Who was he? My sister's words brought me back to reality. My thoughts stopped wandering. Sarah wanted to talk to me about something she'd told me before. We need to decide what to do about Dad's company, she said. My father had passed away a few months earlier, and he left us each a 50% stake in his business. We were to either run it together or sell it and split the money. It wasn't a big company, hell, not even a medium-sized one, just a small decorating firm with a handful of employees and a couple regular clients. Not the most profitable business, but still more interesting than anything I was doing with my life. I think we should sell it. He owned the building, and there's a warehouse full of supplies and equipment. We could make a decent amount each if we find the right buyer, Sarah argued. I didn't agree. I thought we should run it together. That's what Dad would have wanted. My sister didn't budge, though. She said things at work were crazy at the moment. She was working a very important case and had her hands full, and then explained to me that I wouldn't be able to run the business without her help, so we probably should just sell it and be done with it. My first instinct was to agree. After all, that's who I was. I was passive. I let the wind guide me. Never moved on my own will. Never disagreed with anyone. Never argued or complained. That's when I saw him again. He was sitting a few tables away from us inside the restaurant. The closest he'd been to me all day. I knew him. I felt it. But again, maybe not. His presence was heavier than before. The hatred spilled out from his familiar body. His aura of fear growing on me. That's when I decided to be proactive for once and told my sister what I wanted to do with our dad's business. This led to an argument. Nothing serious, but still enough for the man to notice it from his table. He was closer now. I noticed as I listened to my sister's well-founded arguments as to why we should sell. Sarah was a lawyer, so I couldn't really do much to counter her well-prepared logical thesis. My passiveness was gaining ground again, as usual, and I started to realize she may be right. She'd always been the smart one. The man was no longer there, just like before. A few moments, and he vanished. Did he pay? I thought. Did he eat anything? Who is he? I knew him. I was sure of it. Maybe not. We had come to a conclusion, my sister and I. We were going to sell the business. It made sense. I knew it, but maybe it didn't. I asked her why. She said I wouldn't be able to run the firm alone. I wanted to know what she meant by that. She let out a sigh and told me I was a bit of a pushover. I didn't stand up for myself. Always flowed with the wind, never stopping to think about where I wanted to go. She was right, but it hurt nonetheless. I started thinking about the man again. He had been following me, messing with me, and I did nothing. I was a pushover. I was just a spectator of my own life. I knew it. We started to argue. I was hurt by what she said and resorted to making her feel bad by pointing out that Dad would have wanted us to run the company together, that she was tarnishing his memory. Sarah was visibly hurt by that statement and said she needed some air. She got up and headed towards the door. I knew it wasn't true. I knew I was overanalyzing things again, but for some reason, I couldn't stop myself from saying it anyway. I decided I should go talk to Sarah. She was my younger sister, after all. I stood up and started walking to the door. I saw him again. He was back and a lot closer this time, seated only one table from ours. He looked enraged, but did nothing to note to make sure he was so. But I knew he was. I could feel his hatred boiling over. I knew him. Maybe not. I slid the door open and turned the corner to the alley next to the restaurant. I assumed my sister would be there. I should talk to her. That's when I saw him again. How did he go from the restaurant to the alley without crossing me? How did he do it so fast? Those were all great questions. I was so focused on him that I didn't notice my sister squirming at his feet. Her eyes were bloodied and swole. The once straight and tiny nose was now a puddle of shattered bone, blood, and gravel from the ground where she laid. He wasn't done yet, though. The man grabbed her by the hair and lifted her face until she was staring right at his belt. His knee then made a sudden movement and collided with her mess of a nose. Blood spewed out, and she cried aloud. His right hand wrapped around her throat confidently, with more confidence than I ever had, and he started punching. Again and again she cried for help, but I couldn't move. "Please," she wailed at me. You see, I was like the jacket. I flowed with the wind. I went where it pushed me and never resisted or complained. He kept punching her. His knuckles, now bloodied and tired, made him charge the approach. He picked her up and threw her against the floor. Now it was easier. He started to kick her ribs, not the head. That would do it too fast. He broke a few of them, and the shattered fragments of the bones that once protected her lungs now penetrated deep into them, ripping the pleura easily and letting the blood in to drown her from the inside. She didn't scream anymore. My sister could only produce a gargling, gasping sound. The blood filled her throat from the lungs below and gushed from the shattered nose above. He began to stomp on her throat, breaking the cartilage of the trachea. The squirming had stopped by then, the gasping sounds as well. She had suffocated in her own blood. As I looked at the deformed, bloodied body of my sister, I had kind of an out-of-body experience. I couldn't move, and so I just stood there, looking at myself and thinking about what I'd just seen. who that man was and why he did this thing to Sarah. And thinking about our argument, this is where my focus landed. I started to realize that my sister only left because of the fight, how having that silly argument caused all this. That man would never have been able to be with her alone if it wasn't for that. A strong gasp of wind made me regain control. I didn't quite know how much time had passed and the man was no longer there. Much like the rest of the day, I only saw him for a small amount of time. The wind was getting stronger. I realized I had forgotten my jacket inside, so I was only wearing a t-shirt. A salmon-colored t-shirt with a large drawing of an avocado on it.